After the first 4 trumpets are blown, and a third of the earth is destroyed, a fallen angel opens up the bottomless pit, and locusts come out of the bottomless pit. But what other things come out of the bottomless pit? In Revelation chapter 11 verse 7 we see, when they finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war against them, overcome them, and kill them. We go to Revelation 17 verse 8. It states, "The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is." So we have a beast that arises out of the bottomless pit, but normally beasts don't come out of bottomless pits. They actually come out of water. So we know that waters are peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues, as it is written in Revelation chapter 17 verse 15. It says that waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So we have here in Revelation 13 a beast that comes out of water, but is mortally wounded. Revelation 13 verse 1, "Then I stood on the sands of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns, on his horns 10 crowns, on his heads a blasphemous name." And in verse 3, "And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast." So this beast is mortally wounded, but we also have a beast in Revelation 11, and we have a beast in Revelation 17, which come out of the bottomless pit. What is a bottomless pit? Well, in the Bible, there is no mention of an eternal fiery hell, but a pit is mentioned in regards to death and the grave. A pit is a grave. In Revelation 9, these locusts come out of the bottomless pit. So does this beast in Revelation 11 and 17. So what does this mean? A beast does not have a life, because a beast is a kingdom or nation or empire. So since it has no life, it can't be resurrected. So what does it mean that it comes out of the bottomless pit? Let's take into context what happens in the first 4 trumpets. If this happens today, and a third of the earth is destroyed, globally, what will happen to the earth? Pretty much all the governments of the earth will collapse, and so will the economies, and so will communications, trade, anything that relates to business. So if this happens, and every country in the world has fallen, there needs to be a reset. And this, in my opinion, is the true great reset that the globalists want. And this is where chapter 9 comes in, and we have these locusts coming out of the bottomless pit. We read in Revelation 9 verse 2, "He opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke from the pit." So out of the smoke come locusts. Look what Revelation 9 verse 3 says. "Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them were given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power." Jesus made a reference to scorpions in Luke chapter 10 verse 19. "Behold, I give you authority to trample on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you." So right off the bat in Revelation 9 verse 3, these locusts are of the enemy. And do we have other verses to further confirm that these are evil messengers, not good messengers? In Revelation chapter 9 verse 11, it states, "And they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon, which means the destroyer." This counterfeit movement, these false prophets, have Lucifer as their general. Just as Jesus Christ leads the 144,000, Lucifer leads the locusts coming out of the bottomless pit. So what is their purpose? Don't forget, the first 4 trumpets were more of a physical event. Now the next 3 trumpets are spiritual. So whatever happens in the descriptions of the next trumpets, it's actually affecting humanity and their spiritualness. So the purpose of the locusts are actually stated in verse 2. It says, smoke rises out of the bottomless pit, and it blots out the sun and the air. We already know that the earth's been devastated. A third of it's destroyed. Further action on the sun and the air would cause pretty much all of humanity to perish. So if this is not a physical event, what does it mean that the sun and the air are darkened? Well, we have to look in 2 places where there's a reference to sun and air. In Malachi 4, verse 2 and 3, he calls Jesus the Son, S-U-N, of righteousness. And Jesus, in his own conversation with Nicodemus, compares the Holy Spirit to the wind, or even the air. John 3, verse 8, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. So these locusts are darkening the sun and the air. In other words, they're masking Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit with their evil. Well, how do they do that? Don't forget, up to this point, the Holy Spirit's been poured out, and the 144,000 is sealed, according to Revelation chapter 9, verse 4. So the Holy Spirit's been poured out on everyone, according to Joel chapter 2, verse 28. It shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also on my men servants and on my maid servants I will pour out my Spirit in those days. So Lucifer can't have everyone be saved, especially his bunch, the ones that are his. So that's why he launches a worldwide global campaign to subdue this. So the locusts and Lucifer, their general, are commanded not to harm those that are sealed. But those who are not sealed, they're commanded to harm them, but not to kill them. And they're allowed to torment them for 5 months. Now in the later Bible study, I will go over the description of the locusts. Not everything is as important as verse 10, which states, they had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men 5 months. And this is the second time that it refers to 5 months or 5-month torment. Verse 5, it stated 5 months, and now in verse 10, it repeats that. So what are these scorpions? Well, if we look at Revelation 12 and the great dragon in verse 4, his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. How did Lucifer do that? Through deception. How do these scorpions have power to hurt men? The same way. And we find out in Acts that the sting is not necessarily death, but it could be fear also. The fear of death. So between these trumpets, the 6th trumpet and the 7th trumpet, there will be an expansion. And that expansion is in Revelation 12, 13, 14, and 15. So where do we see this fear exhibited? Well, if we go to Revelation 13, verse 14, it states, the beast coming out of the earth deceives the world, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And here is the fear. This is the fear, this is the sting that's being caused by these locusts. And what are these locusts? Based on the description of the locusts, self-proclaimed righteous military force that would cause people to take the mark of the beast. And this is the real Great Reset. I am Daniel for the 144,000. Please subscribe, and God bless you.